Hi, everyone. Ninth and final webinar of the Take Your Product to Market series, funded by the Agri-Food Funding Program. Today, we will be learning about selecting a distributor and/or a broker. My name is Emily Page, and I'm a food scientist with Perennia Food and Agriculture. We offer a wide array of services to support Nova Scotia's agriculture and seafood sectors, such as food safety, agriculture extension, mobile wine bottling, and analytical testing of cannabis, foods, and beverages. Here at the Perennia Food and Beverage Innovation Center, we work with clients on product development, process improvement, nutritional labeling, and shelf life determination. First, I would like to introduce our guest presenter today, Peter Chapman of SKUFood. Peter understands the food industry and he works hard to figure out where it is going. His experience includes both sides of the desk. Prior to working with suppliers and launching SKUFood, Peter worked for 19 years with Canada's largest food retailer, Loblaw. He is committed to using this experience to help producers and processors understand retailers and consumers. Peter is the author of A la Carte and has provided food industry insights to Canadian Grocer, The Globe and Mail, Maclean's Magazine, and Canada AM. In today's session, Peter will discuss how distributors and brokers can benefit your business, play an important role in business models, and what expectations you should have of them. Lastly, just some housekeeping notes for using Zoom webinars. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A button, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom window. I will be monitoring the questions throughout the webinar for Peter, which we will answer at a few stop points throughout the presentation. So please submit your questions as they come up. This webinar, along with the entire series, is recorded and has been posted to our YouTube channel. The Take Your Product to Market playlist is now live on Perennia's YouTube, so be sure to check out the presentations you may have missed or want to watch again. And with that, I'll pass it off to Peter. Let's get started.
Great, thank you, Emily, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today and have an interesting conversation about something that is a really important topic. And for me, it's definitely a question that people ask a lot: is how do I find a distributor? How do I find a broker? What do they do? How should they be or should they not be a part of my business? So I think it's a great topic and one that's got a lot of different nuances. So I look forward to diving into the content and really exploring it. And so what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, I'm going to give you a couple definitions just so that everybody's clear on how we can define a distributor. And I would use the word distributor and wholesaler interchangeably. There might be a subtle differences, but a distributor and or a wholesaler. And then we'll also give a definition of a broker, and so that people are clear on what the differences are. Then we'll talk about how you can find that right fit. And that's something that's very important here, is finding a business that you want to work with, that your business can work effectively with. Then we'll dive right into look and explore the distributor option in detail, just in terms of what they do and how to explore the right ones. And then we'll do the same thing for all the brokers. And finally, what we'll do is I'll share some insights as to how you can find distributors and brokers, because it's not like there's a sort of a telephone book you can go to and say, okay, let's look up the listing and check them out. So we'll talk about that. And then at the end, I've also got a bit of a surprise, which may not be the way that everybody goes into this relationship. So I didn't put it on the agenda, but I want to definitely cover that before we're finished today. So I want you to stay with us until we get to that part, because it's a very important piece to this puzzle. So I want you to think, if you're a producer or processor and you've worked so hard, and you can see the macaroons as an example of a product somebody worked really hard on creating a great quality, and they've got it into packaging, and now it's how do you access the market? And you have choice. There's lots of choices for you out there, and we have now online is becoming in food a more common option for people to use. But if you want to access the retail side of the market, which is in Canada prior to the coronavirus challenges was probably still over 95% of the market would have been in person, people buying your product, depending on which channel they use. That number may have decreased a little bit, but it's still probably north of 85 to 90% of the market is done with personal transactions. So how do you access that marketplace? And distributors and brokers are one option for you to do that. So we're going to explore some of these things. So let's, first of all, what I want you to think about is that finding the right distributor, the right broker, is really like finding a spouse. You need to really do your homework on this. You need to think about this in terms of a lot of different parameters in terms of how they can relate to your business, and finding the right fit. And that's a very important piece to all this. So it's a partnership, and both businesses have to benefit from it. So you really need to think about it as trying to find a spouse for your business. And you may not need to have an elaborate setting on the beach to sign the documents, but you really do need to put thought into it. And you can't just take the first option that comes along. You really need to think, okay, what are the parts of my business where I'm good, where do they fit to shore up some of the things that I'm not good at, things like that. So it's a very important decision for your business to either make the commitment to have a broker and or a distributor. And there's some models where people have both, where they have brokers and distributors. So we'll touch on that as well. But we're gonna explore the definitions of these two different entities first. So let's talk about how to define a distributor. And I've put it on the screen. It's really, a distributor has a warehouse where they would store products. So your responsibility would be to deliver your products to that central warehouse or warehouses, depending on how big they are. And they take possession of your products at that point. So you deliver, you provide them with a delivered cost, and then they take possession of your products, put it into their facility, and then they will then take that product back out on their trucks or however they get it to you, whether it's bicycles or whatever it is, to the stores, and they resell your products. So they carry a bunch of different products. So they have a number of different suppliers coming into that one facility, and then they distribute them out to retail or food service locations. And one thing that distributors do, is that they're people who deliver the products. Sometimes they have a sales force that's the same as the driver who would deliver the products. Sometimes it can be two different people, but they really work hard to manage those relationships at the store level or at the restaurant level. Now, examples of distributors would be on the food service side, which is much more common. We would have Cisco, we would have GFS, Gordon Food Service, there's OH Armstrong. If you are in the Ontario market, there are some, it's a broader group because there are more specialty shops and more smaller food stores where distributors have more access. So you have some more distributors in that market, like Newport Gourmet, you have Neil Brothers, you have John Luca. So there are more choices when you have a bigger population with more stores beyond sort of the typical chain stores that we would call like Loblaws or Sobeys or Metro, because they have their own established distribution networks. And when you're working with a distributor, as I mentioned, they will buy your products from you, and then they mark it up between 15 and 25%. So that's the model that they work on, depending on the department you're in, depending on whether it's dry or refrigerated, or there are a lot of different parameters that influence the markup that they would be putting on your product. So let's just look at a little bit of math so you understand how it works with the distributor. So I've given you an example here where the case cost is $18 and there are 12 units in a case, so it's $1.50 per unit. And so your delivered cost to that distributor is $18 per case. And what the distributor will do, I mentioned the markup is between 15 and 25%. So for our example here, I've just used 20%. So they will mark the cost of your case up by 20%. So when they take it to a retail establishment, they will be selling it for $21.60 into them. So the retailer never sees the 18, they only ever see the $21.60. So your per unit price was $1.50 delivered into the distributor, but then they put their markup on it. So now that changes to $1.80. So that store is going to pay $1.80 per unit for your product. And if they're going to put a 30% margin, and remember the difference between markup and margin, and I know you've covered that earlier in one of the webinars, and I'm sure if you're curious about that, you should go back and have a review of that. But the retailer will work on profit margin of 30%. This is an example. It's not in every category, but just as an example. So the margin they would make on your unit of goods would be 77 cents, and they would sell it for 257 or maybe 259, that kind of thing. So that's how the math works. So it's important to understand how the cost of your product gets influenced when you do use a distributor. Now, that 20% that you're paying them as a fee to take your product around, they incur a lot of costs to do that. They have a sales force, they build relationships with the retailers, they have trucks or whatever method they use to get your product around. They go in, a lot of times they'll put it right up on the shelf. So they have a lot of costs to incur, and that's where they get that markup number from. So that's the math that we would see with a distributor. So now let's talk about the definition of a broker. So what a broker does is they do not take possession of your product. They don't have a warehouse anywhere. Their model is that they have relationships with the retailers, and we're talking with more the bigger chain retailers like Sobeys, Loblaw, Metro, Walmart, Costco, all the different retailers, and they have relationships with them, and they use the power of the relationship they have and the frequency of their visits to the office to be the representation for your products in that office. So they would call you up, if you were going to use a broker, they would refer to you as their principal, and you work together with them, and they take your products and get them listed. So they work through all those kind of challenges and hurdles of getting products listed. Then once a product is on the shelf, then they do the promotion programs, and they work on the annual sales program with the retailer and say, okay, we're going to have an in-store special on these weeks. We're going to have an ad this week. We're going to do demos that week, and do all those kind of things to deliver the sales targets that hopefully you two have discussed, and really do in effect be your sales force for you with the retailer. And one important part of a broker's model is that they should have the retail coverage. So they should have people who travel around to the stores, and it's not probably your key point of contact, but they would have people in all the different markets, and they have the ability to get into the stores, and they go in, and they would usually refer to them as a rep, and they go in and they say, okay, I'm here to talk about our 12 products that are from our principals, and they go in and just check to make sure that if it's supposed to be on sale that week, or if you have an air miles program with Sobeys that has the right signage, if you're launching a new listing, that the stock arrived at the store when it should, and all those kind of things to make it happen at retail. And then they also try to find opportunities at retail where sometimes they could go into a store and say, could we maybe double merchandise the product this week, or could we try it in this frozen bunker as a tie-in to your lead ad item? And they try to work within the guidelines to work with the people at retail to generate more sales. And the way that a broker works is they will charge a commission between 3 and 8% on the sales to each retailer. So they're, again, one of the really good things about the model with distributors or brokers is that it's pay for performance. So they only get paid when your products move. And that's an important thing, because we all need to be incentivized to keep product flowing. So let's just look at the math with the broker. So I changed the pricing because I didn't want you to think it's exactly the same issue, because when you have a relationship that's developed by a broker, it's now your responsibility to deliver the product directly to the retailer. So either you deliver it to the retailer's warehouse, or if you are using a DSD or direct store delivery model, you would have to get it around to each store. And that's where sometimes you would use a distributor to do that. But if your delivered price to the retailer is $24 a case, then the broker is going to charge a 6% commission on that. And I said it was between 3 and 8. And that depends on if you're bringing them an established business or if they have to build a new business or which department they're in. There's a lot of variables that affect what that commission is. But you can see that in my example here, if your per unit price is $2, then the broker will make 12 cents off every unit that goes into that retailer. And you just have to remember that your $2 delivered price to the retailer is really, you're only going to get 188 because you're paying the broker that 12 cents. And then you can see how the retailer would apply the margin based on the $2. So that's how the math works for those two different options. And it's important to make sure, even if you're building a business or building a product model, that you factor in the potential for these two costs. Because one of the things in my experience, I run into people where as they build a product or trying to build a business, they do the distribution or the selling part of it themselves, which is fine. I think that, sometimes that's the right way to build a model. But if you don't factor in enough profit to pay for a distributor down the road, you can't take your product to all kinds of stores at a certain point. Once your product sales grow to a certain point, then it's not realistic for you to do that. So you need to think about factoring in these costs as you build the model. So it's because it's an important cost of doing business. And the last thing I just want to clarify when we're talking definitions is, when you find a broker or distributor and you want to work with them and make it part of your business model, you should never ever think that they're just going to absolutely take over your sales and marketing. That's not their role. You still have to own sales and marketing in your business. This is your product. You have to drive it. But what you can do is use their expertise to develop the program. So in a partnership, that you say, okay, we think we want to do this, and this is how much we can invest to drive sales. And then it's their job to make sure that it gets implemented and that it gets executed at retail. So between the two of you, you would say, if you were Palm Wonderful and you want to do shippers of pistachios, then you would say, okay, we want to do a shipper of pistachios to go out the third week of March. And we want to get that into 80 stores. And they go, okay, yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. It's off shelf, it's impulse buy, we can move them around, that kind of thing. Okay, that's the plan. So you've agreed on that. Then it's their job as a broker. If it's a broker you're talking to, then it's their job to communicate that with the retailer, get the approval for that to happen, set up things to be shipped through the warehouse, and then their retail coverage would go out and make sure that those shippers are where they're supposed to be. And if we're talking a distributor, then it would be that they would take those Palm Wonderful merchandising displayers there and get that around to all the stores and make sure that it's in the store, fully stocked and ready to go for the date. So that's part of it. You can't just say, okay, they're going to do it all, because they won't. That's not their role. And the same thing with coupon programs and any other program that you're trying to implement at retail. It's your job to develop what the program will be, and then it's their job to get it implemented and executed. So those are important pieces of the sort of the definition of what these people, what these companies should do for you. Now, I just want to take a quick break there, Emily, because I've been talking a lot about these definitions and really trying to clarify the differences between the two. So I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions, or if they need any clarification about those definitions that I've been talking about.
Nope, there's no questions yet.
No
I think
questions.
You did a good job. Yeah, you did a good job explaining it.
Well, we'll go with that, and we'll keep going. But if anybody has any kind of things that are sort of in the back of their mind and say, does a distributor do this or a broker do that, then by all means, I'm happy to answer those questions. So we will keep going, and we'll talk about that right fit. And I use the analogy of that finding a distributor or broker. It's like entering into a relationship, like looking for a spouse. So it's very important upfront that you find organizations or people, because sometimes a broker can be an individual working by themselves, that have the same values that you do. And when you think about it, that these people are going to be out there working on selling your product. And we all have different beliefs or thoughts about how we want our products to be sold. Some people are really, really aggressive and they want to go right after it and they want to be more in your face. And other people are more, well, that's not my brand. I feel like I have a great product that will stand for itself, and we have a strategic approach to do it, and that's how we're going to do it. So, and which is fine. I'm not telling you one approach is better than the other. But what I am telling you is that when you're looking for a broker or distributor, just make sure you find somebody who's got similar values to what you have in your business. So if you're a go-getter and you want them out there beating the street and really being aggressive, then find somebody who's like that. The next point is you need to find someone with similar interests. And brokers and distributors cannot do everything. If you find a broker or distributor who tells you that they're good at all of it, then my question, I don't think they'd be very good at any of it, to be honest with you. So I think you need to find people who have similar interests. So if you're in the produce department, you need to find brokers, distributors who specialize in produce. They know the nuances of that department. Or if you're in frozen food, then similar, you need to find somebody who's an expert in that. Because if you're good at one does not make you good at the other. So find brokers and distributors that have similar interests to what you're trying to accomplish in your business. Another consideration is to find people with the same work ethic, because I talked about values, which is one point, but another one is this work ethic. And we have to make sure that your business, your expectations of how much the broker or the distributor can work on your brand and your products are in line with your expectations. So you and the broker need, or you and the distributor need to be aligned, because sometimes we feel like people should be working on our brand all the time. But if they have 15 principles, then you have to respect that you're not always going to be the only thing they're talking about. So you just have to understand where you fit. And then also that work ethic, like, are they going to be constantly at it like you've been, because you've had to work 80 hours a week to build your product and innovation and build your brand and build your production? But if they're not that type of person, then you're going to get frustrated with them. So you need to find people who have a similar work ethic, or companies who promote a similar work ethic to what you are focused on. And you also need to find complementary strengths. So the photo there, so that photo is actually my son, Will, who's 19, and Will can deadlift a lot more weight than I can. So you can see on the screen there that he can, I think that was 605 pounds is what he deadlifted. And he's a football player and all those things. So he has some strengths. Now, I don't have that strength. I'm not able to lift 605 pounds, but I have other things that I bring to the table. So when you're looking for the right broker or the right distributor, you need to find where your businesses are complementary. So you might be great at production. You might have a real passion for producing or processing a product. You're great at watching your costs, but you're not that good at selling. So that's great, because you need to find a broker or distributor who's a great seller. If you are somebody who can really manage costs carefully and get your cost of goods right down, then you need to find a broker and or a distributor who can really take advantage of that and grow your volume, because they might have a slightly better cost of goods or slightly more marketing money to go and use to generate those sales. So find the companies that have strengths that are complementary to your business. Don't find somebody who's really passionate about all the same things you are, because then there will be some gaps. So, and the final thing about the right fit for me is it needs to be the right fit for both. This should not be a gamble on the part of your business. This is not like going to the casino, rolling the dice, or trying to flip over the right card. This is a well thought out decision, and both parties should be excited about it. A lot of times when we're trying to find a broker or distributor, I hear people say, oh, well, somebody's going to take my product. And I'm thinking, that's not the type of relationship that we need to be finding here. We need to find a relationship where you're both engaged and excited about it, because that's the only way in my mind that it's going to be successful. So find that right fit, but but not just the right fit for you, it's the right fit for both parties. And that's so important to have that sort of feeling. And sometimes it's tough to define that, but you really have to look and say, okay, is this the right fit for both? And I said one more thing, and there's actually two more things. So another thing that you need to really think about is you have to work at the relationship. I said earlier that if you find a broker or distributor that you want to have as part of your model, that you can't just say, okay, now I don't have to do anything in sales and marketing. That is not true. You need to constantly work at it. So set targets. So you both should agree, okay, how many cases are we going to do? Which retailers are we going to target? Which store outlets do we want to be on the shelf? All those kind of things. And then you got to come back and assess. Is it working? Is it not working? What do we have to adjust? Because you can't get to the end of a year or something where the distributor goes, well, we sold 500 cases and you had planned to sell 10,000 cases. It just can't work. So you really need to keep working at the relationship all the time, and make sure when you're exploring that you say, okay, how often should we meet about our business? How often do we need to be conversing about sales and deals and all the different things that have to happen? So make sure you get that done up front, and continue to work at the relationship, and treat it like an extension of your sales and marketing department. And you would talk to them about how sales and how customer relationships going and all that. So treat them like an extension, and really work at the relationship. So now we're going to dive into finding a distributor. And this is where I will break it apart a little bit between distributors and brokers. So first, we're going to focus on finding that distributor. So one of the most important considerations is that they have access to the right markets. And when we talk about the right markets, there's different considerations. One is geography. So do they cover the territory, the geography that you believe is right for your products, or where you need them to cover? Because they're not going to go further, because then it impacts their costs. So if they are a regional distributor in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, then that has to match the geography that you want to cover. If they don't cover, say, Newfoundland, but you do, then you're going to need to find another distributor over there, whereas some may cover all 4 provinces. Or if you want to expand into the Toronto market, then there's certain distributors who only cover that GTA market area. So make sure that the geography matches up. The second thing you need to make sure is that they are access into the right channels. So you can see on the screen is a photo from Drug. So make sure that they have access into the channel that you need to get into. And distributors do not access all channels. Just because they tell you that they cover the GTA in Toronto does not mean they cover drugstores in GTA. They may only cover specialty food stores, or they may only cover produce vendors. So you really need to make sure it's the right channel. And then once you're good with geography and you're good with the channel, then you need to assess that they have the right relationships. And I use the words on the street. And that's the term we would use, is they really need to be able to go into the right markets for your product, whether it's high end, low end, whatever it is, and have the relationships that are going to get your product into the store and onto the shelf. And that's something that is very hard to put a value on, but it is worth so much when you find a distributor who's got the right relationships on the street, who can really, make your product move. That's the key to all this, right? Is we want them to sell your products. And distributors have strengths in certain departments. So if you are in the pet food category, here are 4 distributors who focus just on pet. And there are distributors who focus on other categories. And none of these are household names. I even had to look up some of them, and I've been in this business for a long time. So you need to really find the ones who have the strength and the access into the shelf where you need to sell your products. Because again, if you put your product with a distributor, if say you have a pet food product and you try to put it with a distributor who doesn't have experience and access to pet, then you're really going to struggle, and you're going to end up paying a lot more money, and it's going to be very frustrating for you. So find those ones with the specialties, and make sure you focus on the right type of distribution. So some products require dry grocery, and some products require full-on frozen food. So a lot of distributors don't offer everything. So you really need to make sure that they're going to have the right type of distribution for your products. And that may seem like an obvious one, but I've sometimes experienced where people get down the road and they go, "Oh, you mean you don't do dry grocery?" No, we specialize in fresh and frozen. That's, that's why we're 25%. So really find that. And the right size distributor is also a really important metric that you want to think about, because if you are the type of product where you're going to be selling, say, smaller, maybe it's a niche product, and most retail outlets are going to take maybe 2 or 3 cases of each SKU, well, you can't be with a distributor who wants to only work in pallet quantities. And that's how some of them set up their business model. They move big volume, and that's what they want to do. Others are more small and niche, and they have drivers who are used to taking, say, a hand trolley into a store with 12 or 14 cases on it, which that's their business model. And sometimes a smaller distributor may be a higher, they may mark up your product a little more, but in the end, it may be better for you because the large distributors are going to charge you fees to handle small amounts of product. So really think through the right size, look at how much volume you expect to do in the market, and then find distributors who match that. And sometimes you can even tell just by the size of their trucks what kind of sort of volume they're going to be looking to do. So to kind of wrap things up in terms of the distributor side of the equation, the pros of a distributor, and distributors have a valuable place in the marketplace. The pros for distributors are efficiencies. So as your product sales grow and you need access to more and more retail outlets, distributors bring those efficiencies to you, because it might cost you $2.50 a case. If you really valued what your time is worth and what your gas is worth and what a truck is worth and all those other things, it might cost you, say, $2.50 a case to get your product around. Whereas a distributor could do it for maybe $1.75. And the other thing that you think about in terms of efficiencies is that it takes a lot of time to do the work of a distributor. So if you think you're going to be doing it, then think about how much time it's taking you away from managing some of the other parts of your business, which maybe you're better at than driving product around. Another pro for distributor are the relationships. And it takes years to build relationships with some of these retailers at the back door, where you can go in and call them up and say, "Hey, I got this, or got a great opportunity. I want you to look at a new product." Whereas if it was me or you going in doing that, they would just say, "Look, we're too busy today. We don't have time to talk to you." But because they've built up these relationships, they can get access to these markets. And frankly, the retailers put some trust in distributors to say, "Hey, you should have vetted the products before you bring it to me. So, by you bringing it to me, then I know it's a good cookie or whatever the product is." Another pro of distributors is their retail coverage, and they are in these stores all the time. And it's so important because the sales happen at retail. And it's, as much as we say we want to get in stores and we want to get around and see whether they've done the things with our products that we had planned and all those kind of things, it's very hard to do that. And a lot of times we say it and we put it in our business plan, but it's one of the things that gets pushed aside when we have labor issues or we have other issues that come up in the business. So they're out there and they can tell you what's going on. And then the final thing I put in here, headaches, because the reality is dealing with a lot of customers is a headache. So when as your business grows, and instead of dealing with, say, 14 or 18 or whatever different retail establishments where you've got to deal with accounts receivable and you've got to deal with invoicing and all those things that go on, they take care of all that because they're one customer for you. You take your product, you deliver it to their facility, and they pay you the agreed upon price, and then they deal with all the retailers and getting paid and all that. So they do remove some headaches from your business. Now, the cons to a distributor, usually they are much more successful with independents than they are with chains. So they kind of have to build your volume one store at a time. Whereas if you go to a chain like Sobeys, for example, and you get your product listed across Atlantic Canada, well, then that gets you into 84 Sobeys stores right off the bat. So it's a different model. Now, independents are sometimes more aggressive at selling because they've got more vested interest and that kind of thing. There's pluses and minuses to both. But the distributors usually have much more access on the independent side of retail than they do on the chains. And in food service, my focus here has been much more on retail. Food service is different. Distributors actually do have access to the chain in food service, so the franchise businesses like the A&Ws or Subways or whatever. But all of those agreements are made at sort of the office level, and the distributor really in essence is moving the food to them. They don't go in and try to sell Subway on something at, you know, a Subway store in Halifax compared to one in Moncton or something. They don't do that. They really facilitate more what we would call kind of the traditional distribution. So so they do distribute to the chains in food service, and that's really where they do most of their business actually. So another con for a distributor is that you're one of many. You know, they probably list hundreds and hundreds of products, so you have to respect where your position is in the sort of the pecking order. And because they get paid on volume, if you're a high volume product, you're going to get a lot of focus. If you're not going to get that much focus. That's just the reality of the situation. And you have to remember that there is a cost to what they do, and they're going to mark your product up plus or minus 20%, depending on your volume and your department and a bunch of different parameters. So that's a fact, and that's a con, because you do end up, it's out of pocket. You know, it's something that you might be able to sell it a little more if you took it around, but you would have all those costs. So that's the sort of finding a distributor. And again, Emily, maybe I'll just take a pause there because I've been sharing a lot of information about distributors. So I don't see any questions coming up, but if anybody has any right now, or Emily, maybe you do, I don't know.
I do have
I'd
a
be
question
happy to entertain
actually.
any right now if anybody has any.
I was wondering, so we're talking about for finding the right fit. Is there a resource somewhere that you can see even like your local available distributors and brokers, or provincially, or like do you have to go into a really long online Google search to be able to find all that information?
Well, it's you're right. There is no kind of absolute list, and it's something actually that I think would be of value to the market, and maybe someday it's something that I should tackle and try to put together that list and say, you know, maybe it would be of value for distributors or brokers to be on the list. But I'm going to share at the end just a bunch of different ways that you can find them. But Google is one way. You can certainly Google food distributors, and you will get some things come up. My experience has been they're not the best at marketing themselves on the internet. They're better at taking food around and trying to sell it on the street. That seems to be their biggest strength. So sometimes what you get when you do a Google search may not be 100% reflective of the actual business. So all right, well, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to dive into the broker side of things now. So one of the biggest things you need to assess when you're looking at a broker is, do they have access to the right retailers? And I'm a firm believer in really defining who's the consumer who's going to buy your products, and then looking at where they shop. Where is your best chance for success? Where is the right shelf for you? And once you've decided that, then you need to go, okay, find a broker who has access to that right shelf. So if discount is the channel that you've identified as the best chance of success for your products, and you've identified Loblaw with No Frills or Maxi in Quebec as being where you want to go, then you need to find a broker who has access into Loblaw's discount business. And that's really important for you to do that, because if you find a broker who you like, but they're really strong with Sobeys and they really don't have any sort of built up relationship with Loblaw discount, then it's going to take a long time for them to get in there and solve those problems for you. So it's better to try to find somebody who has an established relationship and is already in there. So, and one thing I would point out too, that in Canada, we have a model where producers and processors call directly on retailers. or they can use brokers to do that. In the US market, brokers are much, much more prevalent. So if you're looking at getting into the US market, you pretty much have to have a broker. And in that market, you don't, I shouldn't say you have to, but it's much more common. And especially the traditional food retailers like the Kroger's and the Stop and Shop and some of those chains, they really rely on brokers to vet producers and processors. So once you kind of get in with a broker, it's almost, they have access to the category manager, and the category manager puts a lot of faith in them. Some retailers in the US now are moving a bit away from that model because they don't want the cost. But if you're going to the US, a broker is something you really need to explore. And so once you've established that they have the relationship into the right retailer or retailers for you, then you need to make sure they've got the relationships in the categories. And in the way these large retailers are structured, there are many different category managers. So if you are going to be a deli product, then you need to make sure you find a broker who has access to the right retailers and with the relationships in deli. And that's where you will find the best chance at success. You also need to find brokers that are the right size. And this goes back a little bit to the right fit, but there's very different sizes of brokers. You can find a broker which is a one-person show, or you can find a broker which is a North American wide broker who represents some of the biggest CPG companies. So you really need to do your homework to find what's the right size for your business. And the reason for me to sort of show an image with a briefcase is the question I always want to ask is, when a broker goes into a category manager and opens up their briefcase, and maybe this is dating myself because now people pull out their laptop, but when you open up the briefcase, is my product the first one that they're going to bring out or the 10th one they're going to bring out? And you really need to be happy with the answer to that question. So find brokers that have the right size and the right principles, which goes back to that right fit piece. You also need brokers that have store coverage. And this is, to me, one of the most valuable assets of a broker is the reps in the store who can help get the execution that you need. So if you look at the butter there, that's merchandised sideways. So a good broker would be in there with their people in the store saying, hey guys, you know, that butter really needs to be merchandised sideways. So can we get that flipped around and get it done? Or they could be doing on-pack coupons. So you see on that water there where there's a save $1 now. So if you have a code date issue or you have a special promo where you want to get some more attention, then they can go in and put those stickers on for you that are those impulse and allow you to be nimble. So store coverage with a broker is a very important consideration to understand their abilities. Some brokers are specialties. Some of them specialize just in private labels. So I go back to the pet category here. So if you're a pet food manufacturer and you're interested in producing Kirkland for Costco or Compliments for Sobeys, then there are brokers who are specializing in private labels. So they are the best people because they know the private label side of the business and can open a lot of doors that you might never have been able to get open. So when it comes to those sort of pros and cons of finding a broker, the pros are that they're in the offices of the retailers often. That's part of their job, is to be in there, and they might be in there for a complementary product or a different thing, but they're in front of that category manager and they can go, hey, do you remember we talked about the promotion opportunity with such and such? And they can bring out your product. Also, the retail coverage is important because they've got to be able to get out into these stores. And you didn't hear it from me, but retailers are not the best at executing. So we need to be out there making sure that they're doing what we've paid them to do, whether it's an end cap or whatever. They also solve a lot of headaches for you, similar to the distributors. And communication is there. And two-way communication is so important because you need to know what the retailers are telling them, and they need to be communicating to the retailer as well. So it goes both ways. On the con side, you can be one of many, so that's something to be concerned about. Where do you fit on that sort of hierarchy? And really, a broker's role is to get your plans executed, and they're not going to be as much in with you on developing them. So that's a con. You still got to do that work on the sales and marketing plan. They do not do distribution. So you need to know that it's going to be your responsibility to get the product to the warehouse or the store. And there will be those fees, which are going to eat into your margin. So those are some of the pros and cons for finding a broker. So I think we do have a couple of questions there, Emily. So maybe we can just take a break and answer those right now.
Yep. So the first question is, if I wanted to get into Walmart in the USA, is this a different process than Walmart in Canada, or can I do both at the same time?
It's a different process. Walmart does operate Canada as more of a separate entity. Now, there are times when if you have success in Walmart Canada, that then they will open some doors for you into Walmart USA. But the reality is, if you want to be in Walmart USA, you're going to have to go to Bentonville and go through the process with that group there. It's great if you have some sales history in Canada that you can say, you know, here's what we've done and show some success. But it's really they will treat it as two things.
Can you use your same broker or distributor, or do you usually have to get a new one for the States market?
Usually it would be different. So if you have a broker in Canada, there are some who do both, but most of the time you probably would have to find a different one.
Great. And then the next question is going to a broker for online only different than going to a broker to get into certain stores? Is this a different process or different people?
So I'm going to take it from this question when we talk about online only, that we're talking about getting something listed on Amazon or something like that. And that seems to be emerging as a specialty kind of thing. And I think it's a great question. I'm glad somebody asked it, because it's true that the people who have the expertise to help you get your products for sale online are different than sort of what I would refer to as sort of the more traditional brokers who would be set up to handle the retail side of the business. And there are probably some brokers who have used their expertise in the food industry to get into online a bit, but selling online is different. And so there are people who specialize in that. And so I would probably say right now, you're probably better to find people who have expertise, which would be two different people, expertise in both different channels. I think at some point that will probably come together, but I think it's probably right now you're going to look for two different people.
Yeah, I have a kind of a follow-up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes on like Walmart's website or Superstore, you might, well, more so Walmart, but you can see products that say online only, so you can't get them in store. So is that along the same lines?
That's right. And we're seeing more and more where there are certain products that are only available online. And as retailers are spending more and more time trying to understand the cost of inventory and putting, you know, 2 cases of every product in every store, there's a huge cost to that. And so they're starting to pull back and offer some things online only. And the other thing is that online only gives people an opportunity to kind of explore, the retailer and the producer processor, and say, how much is it going to move? Is it going to move? And then sometimes it leads to distribution at store level as well. So now we're just going to talk about where to find these people, which goes back to your question a bit earlier there, Emily. So one great place is trade shows. Most distributors and brokers do attend trade shows in your particular field. So this is a photo from the CPMA. So produce distributors and brokers would be at that show, and you need to look at the attendee list and find them and learn about them and sometimes set up meetings with them. So trade shows are great opportunities. I like talking to people at retail. So ask the people in the stores, who are the distributors or who are the reps who are in your store, who are the good ones, who get things, who are the people who are getting things done. So ask on the retail side, and usually they're quite willing to share and tell you what they think. You can always talk to category managers. And I mean, really, these are the customers of brokers. So, you know, talk to the people in the specific department. So if deli is your category and you can figure out a way to talk to a deli category manager, ask them, who are the brokers that you find are the best and the ones who really have a great handle on things. So category managers can be a resource. You can also look to complementary items. So if you're in the produce department and say you're selling apples, maybe you want to try to find get some information from, say, a greenhouse vendor or somebody who doesn't compete directly with you, but ask them about brokers and who they might use and who are the good and the ones who are the ones to stay away from. So you can ask complementary products. So that's really the sources of information. You can do that Google search that we referenced earlier, but those are the best ways, in my opinion, to find out that sort of how to find some information about them and also to get to meet them and try to explore whether it's the right opportunity to do business together. So I said earlier I wanted to share one thing with you at the end, which I didn't put on the agenda, and that was accountability. And this is something that I think is so important, and it gets missed in these relationships where we have producers and processors who go, oh, you know, somebody's finally going to take my product. I've got the distributor. This is so good, and which is great. But you need to have accountability because you are paying for their service. So my recommendations on accountability, and this is what makes the relationship successful, is first of all, you need to agree on the plan. And you need to agree on how many cases you're both going to try to sell together. You're going to need to agree on how you're going to go about doing that and how much money you're going to invest to do it. The next thing is you need to have a clear definition of who's going to do what and when. So if there's a special promotion coming on, whose job is it to make sure the inventory is ready? Whose job is it to do the signage? All those little details, and you never want to assume that each other is going to do it. So make sure you really define that. And I always would recommend, sometimes you shouldn't attend them all, but sometimes you need to attend the meetings with the category manager. So that's the Loblaw office there. So if your broker is going in to meet with Loblaw, well, not every time, but you should sometimes attend those meetings together just to understand what's the conversation, how is he or she being received, all those kind of things. You need to attend at least one meeting a year with them, with the customer, and customers appreciate and they want to get to know you as well. So it's important to attend those meetings. And the last thing I want to leave you with in terms of accountability, and I'll go back to my macaroon example, is if you were selling your macaroons direct to consumers, you know, they would hold you accountable for the taste and the flavor and the quality of those macaroons. So you have to think about it in the same way, because now you're the customer. You're paying the broker, you're paying the distributor. So make sure that you are able to get what you're paying for from them. And if you're not, then you're not going to be happy with the relationship. So just make sure that you are both clear on what's going to be done by who, and then you hold them accountable, because you're paying for the service. So make sure that you get value out of that service. And I know we have one question, but I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, and then we'll answer any questions that people have. So what we talked about today was really making sure we have a clear definition of what you're looking for. What is the right thing you need to be successful with your business, whether it's a broker or a distributor. And as I mentioned, some models are both. You need to really think about that right fit and look about all those different parameters of what your business needs and how you can find people who are complementary and be a real powerhouse going to the market. Then we talked about some of the different attributes of distributors and the fact of the access into the right stores for you. And then we talked about brokers in terms of they need to get access to the right office for you and the retail coverage that they have. Covered off some different opportunities to find them, whether it's at trade shows or talking to people at retail or doing that Google search. There are ways. And then finally is just, if you're going to get into the relationship, then you just really need to make sure that you have a means to hold people accountable, because you are paying the bill for them to do this service for you. So that wraps up the summary of what we're talking about. And I'd be happy to answer any more questions that we have. There's a lot to go through here on distributors and brokers.
Yep, so we do have a few more minutes, so if anyone has any questions, please submit them using the Q&A button now. We do have one there that I'll read off now. So it's, when speaking to brokers with multiple store types, for example, Loblaws that owns both Loblaws and low-cost locations like No Frills, whose decision is it to make which locations your product goes into?
So when you're building your product and looking at where are the right markets, then you really need to know what is the right shelf for your product. So if your product is a lower cost alternative, or maybe where value is the most important asset when a consumer is making the decision to buy, then most likely it should be going into the discount channel. It doesn't fit as well into that sort of traditional supermarket like a Loblaw. Now, that's the theory. It doesn't always happen that way in reality. And I would be 100% honest that sometimes when you take a product into a company like Loblaw, they may look at it and you have an idea of where it should go, and they look at it and go, no, this is the banner we want to put it in. And you have to understand their rationale and try to get that from them. But my advice always is to have a going in position, but understand that it is their business and you have to respect their opinion about where it should go. But I always would recommend you have a position as to where it has the best chance for success.
Okay, another question came in, and it's, what would you consider a company who purchases the product from one company and does not directly handle or store the product, but just deals with the logistics of the products and getting the sales?
That's an interesting model. I have to read it again. Consider a company
I know, yeah, it's a little.
from a company that does not directly handle or store the product, but deals with the logistics of the products and getting the sales. I guess it's really somewhat of a distributor model, but I guess I'd be interested in how they get paid for doing that. Because if they don't purchase the product, then either they don't mark it up and get some kind of a fee for doing it, perhaps. But I guess I would call it a distributor, but it is a unique model, and there are different models out there. I think we have to certainly know that in every industry, we're seeing people try to look at different options and ways to get things done. So that is a different model, but there are different models out there. But for me, it would be a form of a distributor.
Yeah, it sounds like a distributor without a warehouse in a way.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to understand that one and see. Maybe that's a model I should be getting into. Who knows?
So it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. Thanks, Peter, for presenting again today and teaching us all about how to best select a distributor or broker. If you have a question that you thought of after this session, please see Peter and I's contact information on the screen. Feel free to email us your questions using the subject line, selecting a distributor webinar, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. This webinar does conclude our Take Your Product to Market webinar series, and we hope you have enjoyed the ride with us. You can check out any of the previous presentations on YouTube. We have recorded all of them. They will all be there except for this one now, and you can watch them again. The webinars are not ending today, though. We will be continuing Thursdays at noon. Next Thursday, we will be starting our new 4-part webinar series with Gary Morton of Morton Horticultural Associates. This will be the Idea to Market series. Be sure to join Gary and I to learn about the Idea to Market Success Map for new food product development. And anyone can feel free to reach out to me directly for that, as I will be hosting again with Gary for the next 4 webinars. Okay, thanks for coming and have a great day, and everybody enjoy your long weekend and happy Easter.